Coming up on episode 40 of Fresh Freedom, Medicaid is the big elephant in the room. Do Republicans have the spine to address it? Welcome to the Fresh Freedom Podcast, featuring freedom-focused representatives who are fighting for your conservative values and defending your constitutional rights. I'm Nate Lucas, and joined tonight by Representative Josh Burkeen, Oklahoma, and Representative Eric Burleson from Missouri. It's great to have you back in Washington, D.C. after a week of recess.
I can't say it's great to be back.
I enjoyed chopping some ice in Oklahoma last week for some animals. I don't know how cold it got in Missouri, but it was cold in southeast Oklahoma.
It was very cold, I understand, in Missouri. I think like sometimes in the morning temperature is like 1 degree.
Yeah, I didn't know. So we have chickens. I didn't know if this was the temperature that might knock them off, but because it got close to 10 digits, negative 12 degrees.
Yeah.
So
Okay. We were dealing with
close.
Similar. Yeah.
So.
Yep.
But they survived.
I told my staff the 21, I think it was 21, the freeze. And I've got very few cattle these days, but there's still one mama cow I kept that she was pretty lengthy as a brimmer, as we call them in South, Brahmin, but she had pretty long ears. And after that week of freeze, she lost about half of her ear. Yeah. So what we experienced last week in Oklahoma, I think probably had some other ranchers that had some brimmer cattle lost some of their ear over that deal too.
Yikes, that sounds a little rough, losing an ear to the freeze. This year, Medicaid turns 60. You guys have a few years to go before you turn 60. But this is a monstrosity that is really down an unsustainable path. And right now there is a lot up in the air as to how to get to the $1 trillion spending cuts that Elon Musk and the Trump administration has promised to deliver. And Congress is really under the microscope right now to figure out a way to get to that number. And Medicaid seems to be like it's the elephant in the room.
Yeah, if you're going to achieve, I think if you just boil it down to simple terms, if you're going to achieve making Trump's tax cuts permanent, you have to touch Medicaid. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to cut Medicaid for anybody that needs it, but you at least need to start addressing the waste, fraud, and abuse within the Medicaid system and reform it in such a way that we're not being taken advantage of anymore. So, so Josh, I don't know if you could elaborate on that. But
we've got to remember what was once for the disabled, the aged, the blind, the pregnant, the nursing mom. Now, the largest subgroup within Medicaid is the able-bodied population. I think I saw a stat just this morning. They're like 44% now. Take the population growth in America from 2012. This is all an increase. So the expansion of the ACA under Obama, we have come as a nation. From 2012, we've grown 6% total United States population. Our Medicaid population, those who are now a part of Medicaid, in the same time our total population in the U.S. grew 6%, our Medicaid population has grown 60%, tenfold. So for every person that was originally a part of Medicaid, the historic Medicaid under Lyndon B. Johnson era, that person now is competing with the able-bodied guy who's not even at poverty level. He's above poverty level, and he is competing with a disabled person receiving the same services, and they're having to wait on the able-bodied gentleman. And so the Democrats wanted us to move towards socialism in healthcare. And what would our founding fathers say? I ran across an incredible quote of Benjamin Franklin, who went to Great Britain, and he was talking about how Great Britain, if you'll follow what happened in Great Britain, they smothered themselves in debt about this time frame, also a few years to follow. But he comes back, and I told my staff, we get the opportunity on the floor and we'll talk about it, but he lays out how the lack of ambition that derived when the government became everything for everyone and started doing things that were only supposed to be, and for our experiment, supposed to be left to the states. But now the federal government's involved. And so there's such a warning of our founding era of doing for those who can do for themselves, and how it doesn't build independence. It builds dependence.
So like, we can go all night, but like to me, I look back at 2017. So Obamacare passed. The Democrats, when they had reconciliation, they did the big bold thing, right? They scored a big touchdown. They expanded Medicaid, meaning that they went way above the poverty line and then started including a lot of people that were never meant to be in this program into this safety net program. Suddenly are now into this program. And then they, tried to buy off the states to do it at a 90-10 match, which is a whole nother story. But we're now at a place where then when the Republicans took charge and they had a chance to repeal it, they didn't do it. In fact, the famous John McCain. So we failed to gain some yardage at that point. And then Joe Biden comes in, right? And what does he do? He takes a program that's already been expanded and then he eliminates the work requirements, basically eliminating work requirements, which is what, at one point in time, Bill Clinton and the Republican Party, shook hands and were able to agree that we need to preserve Medicaid for people that are, that truly need it. But now that's all been undone. And here we are at another chance where we've got, the president, the Senate, we got the House. And I'm wondering if we're going to have the ability to roll back what Biden did, let alone roll back what Obama did, which is the real thing that we need to do.
This is what we're seeing operate. And I use this word with sarcasm. So hear this. Democracy. We are a republic. We got so many founding era people who talked about that we were designed as a republic. It's why the word republic is in our Constitution. It's not a democracy. And yet you have this great quote. It's on my office wall. And it says, remember, a democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of governance. It can only exist until people discover they can vote themselves largesse money out of the public treasury. And all democracies fail for loose fiscal policy. And that's where we're at. Because we are giving away things and we are buying votes. So what the Democrats have done by expanding this pool to able-bodied people who are able to do this for themselves, and we are bringing in socialized health care. Do we want free market capitalism in this country, or do we want to go down the track of socialism? That's the choice before us. And Republicans now, they're getting cold feet about doing this. They're pronouncing a curse on this country of stealing from us. Self-governance, self-reliance, the ingredients of liberty.
And I think that the state of the party is at stake, right? The status of the Republican Party is at stake. Because if we fail here to accomplish the big things, I don't know that we're going to ever get another chance from our base, right? Because I can't tell you how many people that were disappointed, including myself, before coming up here with the Republican Party and with the times in which we had the ball and we didn't score any touchdowns at all or even a field goal. And now here we are and we got this situation. I don't know how we will survive as a party if we let our base down again.
Our financial collapse is upon us, whether it's through hyperinflation, total devaluation of our currency. I've got in my office a $50 billion Zimbabwe note. I paid like $10 online for it. People say, it never happened to us. We've got the world reserve currency status. No, it can happen to us. We can lose this greatest experiment of a republic if we start acting like a democracy and we continue the status quo of being a democracy. It's why the media loves for us to buy in on this word democracy. Why was Benjamin Franklin asked outside of Independence Hall by Elizabeth Powell, did you give us a monarch or a republic? His response, a republic, if you can keep it. He didn't say a democracy.
Let me just go through a couple of numbers here. One, Medicaid spending has skyrocketed. It was $409 billion in 2019. It's up to $618 billion in 2024.
Say those numbers again, Nate.
$409 billion in 2019, and it is now $618 billion in 2024. That's a 51% increase in 5 years.
Go back and I was curious in 2012 what it was. That's before the able-bodied expansion, before we started bringing in the able-bodied, long beyond the mission creep.
Sir, listen to this. You've got 60% of the able-bodied, so there are 24.6 million able-bodied working capable adults on Medicaid. That's more than the entire population of Florida. 60% of those able-bodied working capable adults on Medicaid report no earned income. But the concern here is that the messaging war, the Democrats, they are on an assault. I mean, I'm sure in both offices, the phone, in every Republican office right now, the phones are off the hook.
And look, we need these people to work. That's what's important. I mean, you look at what China's doing and on the global stage, like we will lose the world reserve currency because we're not the economic power engine of the world anymore. We're not the nation that's producing our industrial base. We have outsourced that to China. And you're right, Josh, like the world reserve currency on average, it moves from country to country about every 80 to 90 years. So it went from the Dutch to the French, to the franc, to the sterling and the British sterling, and then to the United States dollar. And we have held on to it for about 110, 120 years as the world reserve currency. It happens, and it happens regularly. And it happens to every country that outsources its manufacturing, its productivity to other nations. So in order to drive down their costs. So the great illusion is that we drove down our costs, cheap labor, by sending it to China, but now the end result is they are pounced and ready to take over the world reserve currency. And when we do, we no longer have the buying power that we once had. We no longer our bonds. Right now they have to buy U.S. debt. They have to buy when they have to trade. They have to use the U.S. dollar when it comes to trade. That will all go away.
I think it's important for people to understand. Because there's, we speak government because that's our job, right? But there's some people out there that often you'll hear people misplace the word Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare you paid into. Medicare you had a contribution of your payroll tax. Medicaid was for the indigent, those who fell in a poverty situation. Lyndon B. Johnson brought that program Medicaid in. It was originally designed for the disabled, the elderly, the blind, the pregnant nursing mother. I mean, it was never designed for somebody who is able-bodied, able to go work, able to produce, and yet that is the largest subgroup now of this. So who is that hurting? Every person watching the program who's lost 20% of your buying power in the last 4 years, a little over 4 years. Right. You can blame that on the $2 trillion deficit, excess government spending. As my friend said a couple of podcasts ago, all deficit spending is inflationary. And every time we are living in excess, government, as Milton Friedman said, the federal budget is always balanced. Either taxing immediately for people for what you're overspending, or you're taxing in the future, or you're inflating your way out of it. And that inflation is the curse that awaits us because we choose to not hit these problems head on and say, there's only so much government we can afford, and we're way past it.
Mm-hmm. So RFK Jr., who now head of HHS, he came out and said that we now have more than 160 million Americans on either Medicare or Medicaid. But his point was that DOGE can come in with their technology and they can help identify, at the very least, waste, fraud, and abuse. They're doing this at rapid speed through other agencies. Mm-hmm. And at the very least, don't you want that algorithm to come address HHS and rid it from Medicaid?
And what they'll do is they'll come in and they'll identify it. But the question is, how do we capture those savings? And it's going to take an act of Congress to do that. That's why I think when I think about what Trump is doing and the political capital that they're putting forward to do this monumental task that's taken decades to get to, and it's bold and it's courageous, but Congress is not reciprocating. Congress is not being responsive, and that's what's necessary if we're going to actually capitalize or capture some of these savings.
1 in 4 people are on Medicaid. So you used 164 million people. Again, we speak government speak, so we know how many people, what the population of the United States is. It's 334 million, I think, is the last census number I saw. So almost half. That's a sum total of both Medicaid, Medicare, which is age dependent. Medicare, you trip when you get to, I'm not going to use, when you get to 65, that's the better way to describe that, okay? But Medicaid does not have the parameter of age. That means half our population, according to the stats you used almost, at 160 million out of 334, are on either Medicaid or Medicare, but 1/4 is on Medicaid. And again, the majority of the biggest subgroup of that is the able-bodied population.
So what would be your message to your colleagues, even on the right, who have expressed concerns that a large percentage of their constituents rely on Medicaid? They look at certain demographics that rely on. I mean,
I would say, as someone who's truly free market conservative, I would end the system altogether, and I would let the private sector and charities perform the role of true charity. But knowing that that's a bridge way too far for some people, I would say, I understand that you are worried about cutting people off of Medicaid, but can't we agree that we should get people off of Medicaid who don't need to be on it and preserve it for the people that do, for the age, blind, and disabled? And if you are an able-bodied millennial who is just not motivated to go out and get a job, then maybe we ought to just say, hey, we're not going to keep this up unless you start demonstrating that you want to get a job, you're educating yourself to get a job, or you are at least working part-time in a job.
So I'm going to add on what Eric's saying, because he knows constitutionally we're in violation of the 18 enumerated powers because of what we're doing with Medicaid. That's a violation because that was supposed to be left fully to the states. Now, it's a state-fed match. But you talk about the able-bodied population, the Fed is picking up 90%, the state picking up 10%. That's crazy, because constitutionally, you cannot find a defense of that constitutionally. So that's what he's referencing. The states, and I think that if we would ever return this block grant back to the states would run it. They'd improve efficiency. They'd make sure that people who are abusing the program versus those who absolutely have need. That's the constitutional way to handle this. The states would take these programs. The problem is we're running afoul of so much of what the Constitution already says, and we've become callous to it. The ability to reform Medicaid is upon us. We have to do it, and if we miss this opportunity, then
it'll never happen.
I agree.
Representative Burleson, you've introduced the Ending the Cycle of Dependency Act, and this is something, and a quote here, the best anti-poverty program is a job. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cut and dry.
Very cut and dry. I think that when I think about like my daughters or people that I love and I care for, who I would say I would rather them get a job. And yes, it means maybe if you have to implement work requirements, if you're in these situations, at the end of the day, I think that's better for the whole of the person, right? There's more to the value of somebody in that being satisfied than just being fed and having health care, and shelter. There's a lot more to a person, and you won't achieve, fully, be satisfied unless you have work to do and something that achieves a mission.
Part of my Bible study this morning was out of 1 Timothy, and 1 Timothy ascribes to widows. I'm not talking about government. I'm talking about for the church. This was church mandate, and it talks about that she needs to be of a certain age. It was in the 60-plus range in the Bible. Find this in 1 Timothy, and she has to, for this widow to be put on the list, she has to do these certain things. And then it calls upon individuals to take care of their own family members.
Yes.
And it says to them, if you choose not to do this, basically you can't even call yourself a believer. So that why would, if people ascribe to the Bible the ultimate forms of mercy, right? Why would the Bible put that in there and have those elements, those characteristics for the church in terms of taking care of the needy? Because the Bible also understands that true mercy also has an element of self-reliance that is for your betterment. It is mercy in the long term for that person who is able to be self-reliant. That is more merciful than the short term of allowing them to remain dependent the rest of their life.
It's fascinating. I'll just end on a poll from Harvard, their Capps-Harris poll. Do you think the so-called Department of Government Efficiency led by Elon Musk is helping make major cuts in government expenditures or not? 60% say yes. Do you think there should be a U.S. government agency focused on efficiency initiatives? 72% say yes. That's from Harvard.
That's awesome.
So You got a loud, small minority out there that is trying to make it seem, and the media is aiding by saying, Doge isn't popular. Elon's an unelected bureaucrat. The reality is people, everywhere you go, there's hope because finally Doge is doing something to clean up this government mess. So, hey, you two are two of the pioneers.
I think, take this all down small scale. The first experiment in American governance was Jamestown. It was the first one that was successful. They tried socialism in two of the ventures. They fell apart because nobody would hustle. Everybody wanted to receive all the benefits and nobody wanted to hustle in the summertime. Jamestown comes in and, yet again, they find this little concept out of Thessalonians of the Bible. Thou shalt not work. Thou shalt not eat. And they employed it at Jamestown. And Jamestown became the first successful. We've tried socialism. Large scale, small, it doesn't work. We have a blueprint. Let's get back to it.
Congressman, thank you as always. Be sure to follow their official accounts on X at Rep. Eric Burleson and at Rep. Burkeen. You can catch Fresh Freedom on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, X, and Rumble. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Stand strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for freedom.